Volume 7 C95. When Layali woke up, she didn't move a muscle. Her eyes blinked and she stared up at the sky. Memories of the previous day descended on her like an avalanche, and she had only one question. Why am I alive? I cut my throat. I cut my throat and I'm alive. Why am I alive? The small child demanded of them both. Brain and Zeshi traded a glance. Layali turned her head only just a little, enough that she was able to see them directly and not only out of the corner of her eye. Her relief was colored by her own fear of the unknown, and her small frame seemed even more vulnerable now that she was confronted with something she had no answer for. Do you know what talents are? Brian asked. Layali furrowed her brow. No. So you've never met anyone with them? Zeshi asked. I mean, I knew a boy who was a good player with instruments. A girl who could sing, a couple who were good at dancing. But that's not what you mean, huh? She asked. No, it isn't. Brain closed his hands together in front of himself. Talents are things people are born with, not everybody, but some. Some are useless. There was a man I knew once who could place one foot on air and walk on it like it was solid ground. But that's it. He couldn't go any higher or move any faster. It kept his feet dry, at least. But it was a mostly useless trick. Others are very useful. I was born with a sword talent. I never had to practice to master any technique. I even surpassed the man who defeated me. I was just born gifted. And another, he was able to breathe underwater. And now, there's you. You can't die. Layali had only one thing to say to that. Brain. Did you hit your head? He's being serious, Layali. You should have bled to death in seconds last night. That was a clean cut with a sword enchanted for bleeding damage specifically from cuts. You should be dead. And with the monster before. That tore open your femoral artery. That kills grown men in less than a minute or two. And from what Brain says about your condition when you met, any one of your injuries should have killed you long before he found you, Zeshi insisted, then approached the girl and put a hand on her shoulder. So why am I still bandaged? Why am I not healed? Layali demanded to know. Doubt clouded her eyes, and Zeshi exhaled deeply. We said you can't die. Not that you heal quickly. Brain replied to her and followed after Zeshi. He went to the opposite side of her, crouched down and took her hand. The body will always try to repair itself. Even with fatal injuries it will try to fix itself until it dies. But yours doesn't die. Poison from that monster, head wounds, drowning, stabbing, slashing, infection, internal. He shut his eyes as he recalled the tearing of her tiny body that Cerebrate had done. Internal tearing, all of these fail to kill you. Essentially, your body will more or less always be able to fix itself. I don't think you'll regrow limbs, but a bone break, a torn artery, a cut throat? All you need is time. Your body will mend the bones, reconnect flesh, filter poison, and make more blood. Layali stopped speaking as soon as she began. Horror settled in on her eyes. Then, if I had remained with Master Cerebrate, then he could have. Zeshi covered her lips with 2 fingers. Don't think about that. He won't survive much longer. He's not anywhere near here and will never get you again. But if anyone else gets me, I can't even escape by dying. This isn't a talent. This is a curse, Layali shouted at the dawn, her eyes going back from one to the other, and the next question occurred to her. Why'd I do that? I didn't. I wasn't trying to die. I swear. A cursed sword. It was a trap. Brain explained, and if Layali's eyes could have gotten bigger, they would have. A trap meant for me. Whether it's targeted to half-elves, or whether it's targeted toward the Elf King's descendants and he's your grandfather or something and we really are family. I don't know. But it was meant to make me commit suicide and you got caught in the trap, the moment you drew that sword. So this was my fault. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't be, but I'm glad you've got this talent or you'd be dead now and it would have been all my fault. Is that selfish of me? Zeshi asked, and when Layali looked at the shimmering eyes of the half-elf, she couldn't find it in herself to be angry. Kinda. But the good kinda. I'm glad I'm not dead now. But this? She put a hand to her throat. It was painful to talk. If anyone gets me again, please, don't let anyone get me. Don't. If anyone gets me I'll never get away. If I hadn't got in that river and Master Cerebrate hadn't been in a hurry, he'd have got me and I'd have all that pain and I'd still be his and no way out, no way out, no way out. Her arms went up as the existential horror came back to her, now coupled with the knowledge that death was not a path of escape for her. It made it all the worse. Brain clutched the girl into his arms and looked past her shoulder to where as she rose to her feet. The theocracy wouldn't think twice about using an unhuman child to get to me. They wouldn't think twice even if she were a human, for that matter. Even I know that much. If we want to keep her safe, we can't keep her at all. Draudillan entered the chamber of the Allfather with her heart throbbing in her breast. In all her life she'd never entered the bedroom of a man, and given the circumstances, she couldn't even pretend she was entering it as an equal. With her eyes closed, she briefly imagined him as a libertine, waiting in bed, perhaps a bottle of wine poured into a pair of cups, his fingers curling and summoning her to save her nation. As in some of the worst novels she'd ever read. Or as the tyrant, the villain ready to reveal that he was behind the invasion of her country, the puppeteer and she was merely dancing on the strings he pulled before he cut them. Or as the cold bureaucrat who demanded she prove her country was worth saving and he had no interest in her as a woman at all. That was arguably the worst, as it left her with no leverage at all. It also seemed closer to the truth than she wanted to admit. Albedo's dismissal of a royal marriage seemed utterly final, and the battle-made monster hadn't even suggested offering herself as part of the bargain. When she opened her eyes, she found something far more ordinary at work. The Allfather was at a stone desk. It had a hinged panel that came down to offer ample space to write, but clearly it could be just as easily closed up. There was a small statue of a raven carved out of obsidian sitting on the top, just where the panel would connect when it closed up, and a handful of documents remained near at hand. His eyes were roaming over one paper, and to Draudillan's surprise, his wives were standing nearby. "It's done," Ein said and affixed his seal to a paper. He handed it to the Holy Queen, who leaned beside him and affixed her seal in turn. "My husband, my lands are yours, and my people are yours. Our kingdoms are now one in every way." Kalka clutched the document to her breast as if it were a child that desired embrace. She arched her back and closed her eyes while turning her face toward the ceiling. "That was so, the moment you married him. This just seals the trivial details," Albedo pointed out, and Kalka opened her eyes and gave a little smile at the demoness. "Royal sister, in the theater of my birthplace they have a saying, the play is not over until the last gasp, nor is the song till the last note. What it means is that until then, anything can go wrong, and frequently will, and at the worst possible moment. Now there's nothing left but the prosperity to come." "Should I have visited at another time?" Draudillan asked as she watched the scene play out before her. "Now is as good a time as any," Heinz answered with a polite wave toward an empty seat, while both Kalka and Albedo stepped out of the line of sight between the Allfather and the Draconic Queen. "We had negotiations to settle after all, though I'm surprised you want to do them now. You've been through so much, if you want to wait until after the Elf King is dead." "No," Draudillan insisted, and stealing her resolve she said, "If I could offer myself in marriage, as Kalka has, I would do so." "You wouldn't be the first emperor to make wives out of the women of many nations. But you're different. Things are different, circumstances aren't the same." She sank to her knees. "I'm in no position to negotiate. My reputation is ruined. I couldn't even protect my maids from the Elf King. My country likely wouldn't exist at all if it weren't for the aid you already gave me, and even the clothes I'm wearing are given at your discretion." She lowered her face to the floor and cast her arms forward. "We are yours to do with as you please. There is no need to negotiate. My country is yours. I surrender. I surrender and beg that your divine mercy fall on your servants in the Draconic Kingdom." "You are not a prisoner here, Draudillan," Ein said while his mind scattered to the winds. What just happened here? He asked himself as the queen he so admired cast herself at his feet. "You are rescued. The Allfather is gracious." Queen Draudillan's voice was a little louder. It had to be as she refused to raise her forehead from off of his floor. "I pray that graciousness extends to my homeland. But while I am not a prisoner in name, the truth is plain for me to see. Negotiations are pointless, and I am no longer willing to play games, to pretend I have leverage that I do not. Tell me what you want, and if it is mine, then it is yours." Ainz looked down at the one offering herself as a supplicant. Even as she was, it was difficult not to admire her. Her voice never wavered, and though she must have been frightened, she didn't so much as tremble. Why hasn't he said anything? The queen wondered. She could feel his eyes on her. My people. They're hard workers, great artisans. When the beastmen are gone, we will raise monuments to your glory in every city. I don't care for monuments. I prefer to be known for the peace of my rule. Ainz explained, though he kept his voice as even as he could. He reached for a blank piece of paper and handed it to her. Just write what you believe should be on there, Ainz said, and Draudilin raised her head. When she saw it, she shot upward, took it, and rushed to the desk where he sat. Kalka moved aside and watched the draconic queen with a mix of sympathy and curiosity in her chest. I half expected him to jump at the chance to add to his harem. As women go, she may not be as beautiful as I, but she's not without her charm. Almost on par with my Kelet. The Holy Queen's mind turned to her closest confidant, who no doubt lay strewn out on the bed they shared, waiting for Kalka's return. Here in Nazarick, nobody cared what they did. It was the freest either had ever been in all their lives, and they reveled in it completely. Draudilin, however, didn't share the same comfort, at least not as Kalka could tell. Poor woman. Even rescued. It's still a defeat. To surrender so completely as if she'd lost a war to him. Well, he is a good ruler, it could be worse. I wonder who he'll arrange for her to marry? The abstract thoughts came more naturally to the Holy Queen than they once did, and she caught sight of the All-Mother looking in her direction. It felt as if her mind were being read, or perhaps, as the radiant Kalka's eyes held fast under the All-Mother's stare, we are horses on the same track. She realized, and their thoughts aligned to one another so well that at the same moment, with the same dispassionate smiles on their faces, they watched as the foreign queen scratched quill over paper. There, Draudilin said. The Draconic Kingdom surrenders unconditionally to the Allfather and the Kingdom of Nazarick. The queen binds herself and all her heirs to the service of the House of Ainz-ul-Gaun, and recognizes his godhood without question or reservation. The queen reached for a small blade used to slice wax seals, pushed the tip to her thumb until a bright red drop appeared, and then after replacing the tool, she squeezed the thumb to bring more out. She then pressed her thumb to the document just beneath her signature. By the custom of my kingdom, I bind my word by my blood. You are my god. You are the master of my life and my lands. Command me. Draudilin replied, and went to her knees at his side. Kalka and Albedo glanced at one another again. In one fell swoop the queen, who had nothing to bargain with, put herself as the first kingdom to acknowledge the divinity of the Allfather. With the date on what passed for a treaty, it wouldn't fail to be recognized. Not unless royal honor came into question. Ainz affixed his seal to the document in return, while privately wondering, what just happened here? Did she just call me a god? He took a slow breath and hoped he looked majestic when he took kingly understanding gesture number 3 and placed his hand on Draudilin's shoulder. Rule well, that is my command. And for now, get some rest. If you are ready, tomorrow we resume the journey to our winter. If not, you can remain here and I will bring you by gate when the time comes. It was soft words that followed, formal and quiet. The Queen of the Draconic Kingdom said, "No, my lord. If your servant's title is still her own, then it is her wish to travel with the others, even if she must depend on your largesse to carry her again. Then we'll have a carriage ready with the others." Ainz promised, and removed his hand to allow the queen to stand. When she did, Kalka said sweetly, "Welcome to the winning side." Thank you," Draudilin said as she made her way out. "Husband, if there is nothing more, I believe my Kelet is growing impatient." Kalka licked her lips without noticing that she'd done it, and Ainz chuckled. "I believe Albedo is feeling the same." "Go on," he said, and Albedo chuckled as Kalka made her exit, the door closing firmly behind her, leaving the Allfather and Allmother to fall into an embrace in private. Volume 7 Scene 96. "Master," Noah said when the door was opened to their room. He turned around to see it click shut with her fingers on the handle. "Raymond," she added, "did you want to write more letters today?" "I do," he said and pulled the seat out from the desk for her. Their journey was more winding than originally planned, with stops at every village and town that he might have breezed past before, and there he was driven to question every priest and priestess, every human and, to Noah's delight, non-human in his path. With the barrier in his heart lowered at last since their confrontation, it was as if an obstacle were removed that let him see the wider world. Whenever he wasn't looking, She watched him ask even common people with an almost childlike wonder. It was almost a chore to keep up with him. That's a black scripture for you. Even at his age. Nu considered it often, and now in their room, it was time to transcribe what he'd seen and learned. He was halfway through the letter when she stopped scribbling and he stopped talking. Nu, is something wrong? He asked. Raymond, she said, and lowered her quill. She thought for a moment and then looked him square in the eye. Master, she chose the title and it caught his ear. Is it really wise to write about the belief in the All-Father's divinity? The rule of the Six has been firm. A god that doesn't mark humanity special, but treats humans, elves, dwarves, all as equally in service to him. You know as well as I do that this won't go over well. Raymond inhaled deeply, reached for a chair and dragged it over to where Nu sat. He planted himself sideways so that he was facing her where she worked. The desk was ornate, polished dark wood, with fresh banded candles ready for use with clean sparkstones in their dish to make the wicks light with ease. It also came equipped with scribal materials, stationery, fresh ink, and a series of quills that preserved the materials brought with them. The rest of the room contained a single large bed, a wardrobe the height of the ceiling, and its own bath access with a pump. With expensive sheets and service on call, it was what Nu expected a head of state to stay in. And yet when he sat himself down to face her, she could only think of him as naive. Till he spoke. You're right, he said. You're crazy. If she stopped. Her ears wiggled up and down. I'm sorry. What did you say? I said, you're right. Raymond repeated. He exhaled and held out his hands, not to take her own, but to offer the ones he had. She looked down at them. They weren't large, being only a little bigger than hers. Nothing about Raymond was truly massive. Though he had square shoulders that were fairly broad, and a tight, solid body that paired well with his well-tended brown beard, still, putting her hands into his seemed less than ideal. It's never ended well, she thought, and cursed herself. As his hands began to withdraw, she took them and let his fingers close over her hands without complaint. And that's why somebody has to say it. I doubt it will be long before one nation or another decides to openly declare him to be a god. He certainly has the power of one, and that fact may draw a lot of people to yield faster. Before they're destroyed. Raymond's lips went tight, his face was blank, and though Nu searched it, she could read nothing. Raymond. What are you thinking? She asked with a tentative lean forwards as if she expected him to whisper. Do you know what I see in my nightmares, Nu? He asked. What I've seen since I don't know. Since you slapped some sense into me? He tried to smile at her and reached up to rub his cheek, but she neither smiled nor laughed in return. I see revenge. I see a nightmare crossing the horizon, east and west, and there's nowhere to go. All our decisions, guided by our sense of divinely given superiority, and bringing down wrath on us that we cannot placate. Too late to change, all we can do is die, and all we can feast on is our own hubris. Sometimes I think it happened. That this is all a dream. What if things went differently and we... This sounds insane, doesn't it? He asked and brought a hand up to rub his temple. No, not as crazy as you think, Raymond. I understand, you want to start the discussion now, because you're afraid it'll be too late if you wait, Nu said, and far from the elation he expected, her face grew serious. If you do that, you know they'll come after you. The same ones who you say will come after me if you let me go. If you send me away, they will try to kill you. She stood up and leaned forward, placing her hands on his shoulders, then moving them to his face. His beard is softer than I thought it would be, she thought, but kept that to herself when she said, these are the people who hunt my kind. Who take the children they made with us and turn them into hunters of the siblings who run, or into domestic servants to serve legitimate heirs. They're the people who did what they did. To my back. The ones who made me ugly forever because they got a thrill out of it for a few hours. They'll kill you if you take this too far. Nu pronounced her warning without pulling any punches. You understand that, don't you? I know they'll try, Raymond said, and reached up to take her wrists in his hands. He pulled them away from his face. But I rose up through the ranks of the black scripture. Not the windflower, or the sunlight, or the grey or the Aganti or the Holocaust. The black. We're the strongest of the strong. We have all of the Godkin bloodlines. I didn't rise to the top just because I am a good administrator. I fought with the best of them. Even if the Aganti were decked in some of our best equipment, anything less than a squad of them is not a threat. Still, you're risking your life. Out of some love of your country. That's pretty impressive. Nu acknowledged, but he shook his head. No, not just for my country. In those nightmares I spoke of, I see the cause. And I see. He reached behind her back, and though he didn't touch the vast ridges that made up the marks of more than 3 human lifetimes, he felt her stiffen and take his arm. He swept his hand up and down without touching them. I see that. I see your face twisted in pain, and I wonder what kind of monster could do that. And it's me. I was going to mutilate you. It was your face that stopped me first. I didn't see an elf, but a person. What if it had only been your back that I saw and there'd been nothing to move me to? What did you call it? Empathy? I could have been a monster. I suppose. I still am. He dropped his hand away, his body went limp and he looked up at the ceiling. But I don't want to be. I'm trying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I almost did, and what I might have done, and what I've helped to keep alive for my whole life. For my ignorance. For my lies to the girl I love like a daughter. Gods, she'll never forgive me either. How do I make up for this? How does my country make up for this if I succeed? Nu raised up her hand and slapped him across the face. Though she sensed that he could have easily stopped her, he didn't, and she lowered her hand while he touched the struck place and looked at her questioningly. I'm sorry, she said and placed her hands on her lap. Would you like to hit me in return? Or will you forgive me? I don't want to hit you, but... What was that for? He asked as he rubbed the spot some more as if he weren't sure it had actually happened. Will you forgive me? I was wrong and you didn't do anything. And I'm sorry, Noah said again, and he nodded. Just don't do that again. It may not hurt, but it's the principle of the thing, he said, and she inclined her head. I can forgive you, Raymond. For what you almost did. I can forgive you. For the things you've actually done to me. I don't know if I will ever think well of humans in general. I'd rather avoid you all if I can. Not that that's possible, she groused a little, but for what you've done, seeing what you're trying to do. I can forgive you. But there's a lot of things we'll never be able to make right. Not you, not me, not if all the world came together and worked with sincere hearts. It's just too late for some folks, and that's that. You didn't make me ugly. Someone else did that, and they'll never be punished for it. They died a long time ago. I'm just their living memorial, so I can't forgive you for it. You didn't do it. But if you're going to try to help my people in the here and now, I'll take the risk with you. What do you mean? Raymond asked, and Nua's brief twisting of disgust when she spoke of herself vanished when she said, you plan to send these copies to your comrades. But if you really want to go a step further, send them everywhere, to governors and bards, to temples and merchants. Tell them everything you saw, everything you learned, and everything you now believe. About non-humans, about the Allfather, about home for you. Everything. You really think that would be effective? Raymond asked. He couldn't help but doubt it. The theocracy has always been a very top-down organization. If you want to shake a tower, the base is the only place to do it. Nu answered him, and then took up her quill again. New paper, we'll return to that letter afterward. I want to start something else, Raymond said with sudden iron in his voice. Master, she said with a touch of irony, and moved a blank sheet into place and held her quill at the ready. Before we begin, he said, let me be clear. What happened? It was brutal, cruel and wrong. But... He cleared his throat. But what? Her blue eyes narrowed a little as the words dripped out. But none of you is ugly, no, not even that, he said, and her tongue was tied as he began. On the treatment of the elves and the monstrous injustice of our past and present, O people of the theocracy, I present to you a case study. A servant given to me for this journey, and what we have done and allowed to be done. He put his hand on her shoulder and squeezed. Now, tell your story, he said quietly, and though water dripped on the paper as she wrote, her quill never slowed, not from one page to the next, for hours. Volume 7 C97. Maybe elves are gross, with those ears and all. But at least that one stayed cozy. Cerebrate muttered. What do you think? He asked his last victim as he held him beside the river. The boy said nothing. That was a consistent trait of the dead on which Cerebrate could always rely. He kicked the corpse of his last victim over towards the river, and it tumbled down the hill, rolling like a log until it hit the slight incline, flew over it, and splashed down into the water. He didn't cost much at least. Cerebrate thought of the coin lost on it, but it was very little. Just the cost of saying I was hiring an apprentice. I suppose this is at least easier than it was in the Draconic Kingdom. Draudilin's contempt for me, so thinly veiled, if only the Nazarakians had shown up another year later, I could have seen that precious face turn to one of pain, from contempt and hate, to anguish and terror. But that chance was gone. All his prey along the way after having lost the elf trash to the waters had taken a fragment of his anger toward the Draconic Queen, with him to their final resting places. Disguising his work was easy, claws to hide stab wounds, or toss them into the water, or find a creature and throw the dead meat to it to be eaten. For a day or two he stayed while the searches were done, the bodies were found and the victims mourned, but nobody ever suspected murder. And when he adopted someone saying he wanted a young apprentice, nobody ever asked for anything to prove it. He watched the body drift down river, bobbing and floating, and Cerebrate felt nothing but a vague hint of satisfaction that he'd gotten away with it again. His charming, radiant smile that won over those who didn't know his preferences, spread over his face and he gave a large farewell wave to the corpse as it bobbed around a bend and finally out of sight. He turned around and looked ahead. In the distance, not but 1 or 2 days' travel if he took his time, the city of our winter loomed large. Maybe I should have kept the carriage. But no. After having to dispose of the driver when I bought a human. Just too much trouble. He shrugged off his own words and his thoughts turned almost pensive. I may not be able to have the same fun there, but then, I don't need to. Even if I don't win, I'll put on a show and spread my fame here. I'll find some easy work with some lazy fat noble and then I can indulge to my cock's content for the rest of my days. It was a warm, savory thought that caused the knight to lick his lips, rub his hands together, and he walked to his horse with a spring in his step and a song in his heart, ready to set out on the last leg of his travels. Journeying into the Baharuth Empire's lands proved far easier than Ainz expected. Their military patrols were almost entirely absent, and what fortifications there were to be seen were almost unmanned. A twinge of guilt lodged in the pit of his gut. I killed them as painlessly as I could. It's not my fault they chose to attack after losing the duel. They should have drawn back, they should have negotiated. But the screams of the dying touched his soul nonetheless. Though experience had hardened him to a degree, having slain his way through 8 fingers and their martial artists in 6 arms, not to mention the many quests as Moman to crush Zuranin or other various monsters, and the brief demon war under the mountain. This empire was still his first. And the first never left him. Especially now that he could see the aftermath of the empire that lost faith in itself and in its emperor. I wonder if I would have learned as much from watching Jerkniv as I did from watching Draudilin? Maybe so, perhaps we would have become friends, even. Without an answer for himself, he set the question aside. When we have a ruler installed, I will make sure to treat this place more gently for a while. Of course there is still the matter of rebuilding the Draconic Kingdom. And the slain theocracy may still pose problems. Plus there are the Dragon Lords. Still though, this is a large step forward. My lord? Kellett asked while holding the royal air, and he turned his attention toward the Queen's lover. Yes? He asked. You seem distracted, are you well? Kellett asked, and Ainz raised one dark eyebrow. Merely thinking of the future. Even when this is over, there are still challenges. Some of our reforms have only the bones of structures erected and will take years to bring into being. Others will be easy, and there are so many challenges ahead that it boggles the mind. Ainz spoke with the same formal address he'd heard Draudilin use 1,000 times, and it had the desired effect. Kellett caressed the infant's face. I understand, but you will have many fine servants and loyal, gifted children to achieve your goals. Kalka told me about what happened with Queen Draudilin. Her country may not seem it, but they are a clever people, resilient and strong-willed. You say that like you know about them, Ainz stated, but it was more a prompt, and Kellett treated it as such. My sister and I, we went there to help fend off the beastmen once. It was training for us, but Remedios and I saw a great deal there. It's a fine place. She trailed off and looked from the infant to the infant's father. How is my sister? Is she as suffering? Kellett asked and blinked her eyes several times. Is she dead perhaps? I believe she is well, her suffering is largely self-inflicted. Ainz remarked, That was a thing about which he felt no guilt. If she had the power, she would slaughter my children. Anything that happens to her, I care not a damn about. He thought, but kept that thought to himself, seeing Khalid's brief distress. I see. She was always her own worst enemy. She abided by the law for so long, but she was so stupid. She just never understood its limits, and raged at them. I never imagined she would go so far. But thank you for what small mercy you could give her. I'm grateful for that. She may have been bad, but she's still my sister. Khalid answered him, and when he held out his arms, she put the small boy into the arms of his father. Is that why you asked to ride with me for a few hours? Ainz asked, and Khalid bowed her head. It is. And also this. My queen. She cannot bear you another child. I know she hasn't told you, and she wouldn't. But birthing Aurelian, it nearly ended her life. So, I'm asking you. I beg of you. Don't seek more children with her. If you do, I'm certain she'll be lost to us, lost to me. Khalid pled. I felt more secure when I assumed you intended to bring Queen Draudillan into your house, but when Kalka told me what happened, I knew I had to speak with you. To birth the child of a god is a dangerous thing. Nobody had survived it until my queen ever, as far as I know at least. At least not a child with awakened powers or potential. That's why we split with the slain theocracy. A godkin was in love with a woman of Kalka's ancestry, and the woman refused, leading to a schism that formed the Roble Holy Kingdom. She was popular among us and everybody knew that to have that man's child would be the death of her. The theocracy insisted, and so parted ways after swiping some of the treasures. Treasures? Ainz asked. His collector's instinct was on fire the moment she said it. Yes, the slain theocracy has some of the weapons of the gods, powerful items that are said to alter the very world itself. Khalid explained and then asked, forgive me, but I'm sure that after things happened, I disclosed all these things. Does my lord not recall? There was a near library to go through. Ainz chuckled. I'm sure they're still sorting through everything. Even for a god, good help is hard to find. Ainz graced her with a lordly smile and Khalid turned her face away. I see. If it pleases you, I will tell you what I can recall, but, please, it weighs on me, my Kalka. Khalid pressed the matter, and Ainz ran a finger over his son's forehead. I'd say she already did it right the first time. There's no need for her to bear another, Ainz said without looking her way, and out of the corner of his eye he felt sure he saw her loyalty meter reach maximum in an instant. Thank you, my lord. Now let me tell you what I can recall about what lies in the theocracy treasury, Khalid said, and began to regale him with what the stories said. Volume 7 C98. The next few nights after they first lay together, Brain and Zesshi did not sleep with the fire between them, however, nor did they lie together as lovers. They might have, but on her first night of recovering from her neck wound, as Zesshi lay out their bedrolls and placed his and her own side by side, no sooner had Layali gone to sleep than the small girl shot up to a seated position, bawling and crying out. It won't stop. It won't stop. It won't stop. She flailed with her eyes wild and wide, her little arms reaching for nothing and breathing hard, and when she realized she was fine, she looked over toward where Zesshi and Brain were rising and said, Can I sleep with you? I had a nightmare. Yes. The two said without hesitation, and they inched themselves apart while Layali got up, holding her bedroll in her arms, and flopping it down between the warriors before sliding herself down into it again. She then reached over and took Brain's arm and flopped it over her chest, before repeating the process with Zeshi's, and said with a sniffle, Now I can sleep. If only we didn't have to tell her. It wasn't that long ago that she was suicidal. She didn't want to live and had nothing to live for. Death was her final escape from harm and we had to take it from her. It was hard for Brain not to feel guilty about that, and his resolve grew to make sure she was dropped off safely as soon as possible. For the next few nights, Layali slept between them when she slept at all, and she remained closer to them than usual. On the fourth day, when they saw the town growing larger in their view, she looked up at Brain who rode behind her, and over at Zeshi who rode at his side. She said, Please. That was all. They didn't have to ask her what she meant. They said nothing at all. The horse's hooves were the only sound between the two. Neither Brain nor Zeshi felt much like speaking, nor could they look at her, so they looked ahead. An hour later, when they could hear the noise of the bustling, growing town, Layali pressed herself back against Brain's chest, Please. She begged, and her hands grasped the mane of the horse hard enough to turn her fingers white. They rode in through the gate unopposed, and again neither of the pair had an answer. Brain clenched his jaw, and out of the corner of his eye he could see that Zeshi was preparing herself for the same thing, her jaw set and fingers tense around the pommel of her horse. I don't want to. Layali whimpered. I don't want to. Doesn't that matter? It didn't matter to Master Cerebrate. But I thought it mattered to you. Please. Please, she whispered. Brain. Zeshi. Don't make me. She asked again. The orphanage was a fairly obvious building, a sign with a picture of a child next to a house. Brain slid off the back of his horse, and Zeshi dismounted. Even to themselves, their movements were stiff, and bodies felt heavy. They moved sluggishly while reaching for her. No. I won't go. I don't want to be left here. I don't like this place, Layali shouted and clutched the white hairs of the horse's mane between her fingers. I don't wanna. She screamed as Brain pulled her from it. He clutched her against his chest while Zeshi bound the horses outside. I'm sorry. But this is just too dangerous. The ones who came after Zeshi will try again. You'll get hurt, maybe worse. I'll come back. Brain promised as he whispered into her ear, but the little half-elf barely understood. Her tiny fists and slender legs swung with fury. Don't, she cried out as Zeshi came close and stroked her head. It'll be okay. You'll get good food, we'll leave them with money to take care of you, plenty, you'll be all right, and we'll bring you Cerebrate's head on our way back. But I'm hunted. Hunted by dangerous men. I got you hurt already, badly. I can't do anything, Zeshi said, though her lip quavered as she said it. Be mama. Layali screamed as she tried to fling herself back out of Brain's arms when she realized they were carrying her toward the door. Brain can be papa. I don't wanna not have either again. Please don't make me go. I don't wanna be here. I want Brain. I want Zeshi. I'll tend camp and cook and everything, just let me stay. Her face was red and tear-streaked well before they made it through the door, but she lost the power of speech when she came in, and was reduced to choked sobs. A matronly woman behind a desk in the open area, who had a cane leaning by her side, stood up when Brain and Zeshi entered. What can I do for you? Are you dropping one off? Is she yours? Her voice immediately caused Brain and Zeshi to look sideways at one another. Her face, lined with wrinkles and her hair grayed and done in a severe bun, was not made warmer by her businesslike expression. Yes. No. I mean, I found her. We've been taking care of her, but things happened, and we can't anymore. Brain explained while Layali's tears ran down his chest straight through his shirt. I see. The old woman said and pursed her lips. Would you care to make a donation then, if it isn't poverty driving you to leave her here that is? Will it go toward her care? We want her to be treated well, Zeshi said, and taking Layali from Brain's arms, she squeezed the girl once. Yes, of course. The old woman insisted, and Zeshi reached into her coin purse to draw out a handful of gold coins. The old woman sucked in her breath and the whites of her eyes grew when she saw the small fortune in the palm of the half-elf. The coins clinked as they fell into the old woman's hands and then disappeared into her own coin pouch. All right. Do you wish to say goodbye to the child? You may do so if you wish, but we recommend it be quick and that you leave immediately. A clean break, you know, it makes it easier for them to accept their circumstances. The old woman added. I'm sorry, goodbye, I thought we could take you to our winter at least. But it's too dangerous, you will get hurt, Brain said and kissed her forehead. I'll finish Cerebrate for you, I promise. If there were any other way. But I won't let them use you, Zeshi insisted. I'm sure someone will pick a cutie like you up quickly, and you'll have a bed, and a roof, and an education, and food every day, and you won't have to worry about me screwing up anymore. Zeshi blinked black tears as the old woman reached out and slowly unfolded her arms around the small half-elf as Zeshi and Brain relaxed their hold on her. But I want you. I want you to be Mama and Papa. I want you. I don't want anyone else. Nobody else'll want a half-breed. I don't want to go unwanted. I don't want to be here. Please. I love you. Please don't leave me. Layali began to howl as the old woman pulled her away while her arms flailed around, stretching out to grab for the two of you who let their arms slip away. Layali wailed and kicked, You'd, Better go. This won't get easier if you stay, the old woman said as she wrangled Layali like she'd done it 1,000 times. The elder pair retreated, backing away, their faces broken and red. They made it through the door and shut it just in time to cut off one final wail. Mama. Papa. Come bar. We did the right thing. She'd only suffer if we kept her. She'll understand that when she gets older, Brain said as he made his way back down the steps. She put herself at his side. The screams were already diminishing behind them. I won't stop hearing those for a long, long time though, if I ever do. She reflected, and then asked of Brain, maybe you're right. But am I supposed to feel this shitty about it? If a man like me can. I expect so. Brain replied when they reached the horses. They mounted the white steeds, and Brain reached down to grab for Layali, and found that she wasn't there. Right, he murmured, and with that, they rode on in silence.